Welcome to the 23rd episode of the iDebates channel and the first ever episode for the Discord server Natural Order.
Poggers.
Okay. um You threw me off. This special event
I'm
is a
sorry.
collaboration. It's okay. This special event is a collaboration between 6 different communities across the Discord and YouTube platforms. We have with us members from the servers Late Night Philosophy, Abortion Debate, and of course Natural Order and iDebates. We also have the YouTubers Stephen from Cider and Port, and finally the YouTuber Leo Phileas. Each of these communities are based around discussions and debate of subjects like religion, philosophy, current events, and politics and science, economics, and more. All of our platforms will be linked in the description box so you can check us out down below. And it would also help a lot if you could like, comment, and share, and subscribe to let us know that you enjoy this content. Now, to get started, our channels decided to collaborate to discuss the question, how would you pursue your ideal world? It's a pretty broad question that can go in almost any direction, but we're going to start with political. Is that okay with everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Political
Absolutely.
or
Yep.
philosophical? Okay, we're going to
Mhm.
go with political for now. We have a panel of people from each platform who will be discussing amongst themselves for the first 45 minutes or so. The audience the next 45 minutes, the floor will be open to the audience to ask any questions or to continue the conversation. There is going to be a lot of activity, so to keep it orderly, here are the rules. It's my role as the moderator to keep the civility and topic at hand flowing smoothly. Direct insults, excessive profanity, and excessive talking over one another is not allowed and you will be muted temporarily. This is meant to be at least semi-formal, so while you may not need to have a proposition prepared in advance, please respect others who are talking and maintain etiquette even if things get heated. People listening are encouraged to use the text chat to deliberate the conversation with each other as well. To aid in the flow of the discussion, ping me or the moderators to ask questions to anyone on the panel directly or type out your question and it will be read out loud. Just make sure to let us know who the question is directed towards. If everyone agrees to these rules, the panel can start conversing. So, how would you guys pursue your ideal world? Anyone can start.
I personally, I would pursue it by expanding democracy, not just within terms of our and I don't know where everybody's at, so I'm going to be speaking from being in the United States. I'm assuming most of us here are from there. I don't know for sure, but I would expand democracy in our political institutions, but also within our economic institutions, because I am a fan of democracy. I love democracy. I think it's the best way forward for humanity, with all 8 billion and growing of us, to best live together.
Yeah, I mean, I would kind of second that. I mean, I best kind of associate, or I best kind of identify as a socialist. So yeah, that would kind of be my ideal world. In one, like, where we live under socialism, where we have a robust and self-sustaining social safety net and social programs to help those who are struggling, or who are any sorts of scenarios. So I'll just kind of keep it brief and just kind of leave it at that, and I'll leave it over to the next person.
If
Well,
I may,
I would.
Sorry, continue, please.
No, go on. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah.
I would counter that. I wouldn't expand democracy because I don't see it as the most important thing there is for ideal world. I would pursue an ideal world by building culture, and specifically by building civilization by any means that are needed and with any means that are possible. That
Right.
would.
So
Yeah, good. Sure, go on.
yeah, go ahead.
No,
Are
I
you
have
done?
my turn. Please continue.
Yeah, sure. So I would actually argue against democracy, but not in a tyrannical sense. I would say that the best way to pursue your ideal self or live in the best way possible is to put focus on the sovereignty of the individual and property rights. I would actually argue that democracy can be quite tyrannical. So that is my position. I would put focus on sovereignty of the individual and private property rights. Limited government at best.
I would build my ideal world, preferably the democratic, and if possible, and if needed, revolutionary collectivization of the means of production, distribution, and exchange, and of course the expansion of democracy.
Right.
Is everybody kind of done giving sort of an introduction for themselves? I'm assuming, because if anybody else wanted to like jump in on that first part, please go ahead.
Anybody else?
So a question I had for, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this correctly. I can't see your name. Why is it not letting it pop up? The guy with the no face in the suit with the colorful background. Psycho something?
Yeah, just
How
call
do
me
I
Psych.
pronounce it?
Yeah,
Psych?
just call me
Okay.
Psych.
So just a quick
Psych.
question. And I do ask this genuinely, because I understand it might come off as kind of smart-assy, but I am asking genuinely. In what
No, it's fine.
ways would you consider democracy to be similar to tyranny?
Well, because well, to give you an example, if you have the majority of a crowd agreeing on one principle, and you have a minority that is not agreeing on that principle, then you're basically pushing your ideas on the minority.
I would agree with that, but I would also say that, or I guess let me phrase this as a question. Would it not be better
Right.
for, and when I say majority, I'm not talking about like just a very simple majority. I'm talking more within the context of a vast majority. Would it not be better for the
Right.
needs of the vast majority of a society to be met over the needs of a very small minority of that same society?
Well, not necessarily, but that depends on what you mean by the need. So,
Oh
so
yeah, I
to
guess
put
you got
it
a point there.
simply, yeah. So like if the need is to communicate, you don't have to have a room full of people where they agree on everything, but you can still communicate, right? Respecting your
Yes.
boundaries. But
Yes.
yeah, so you get the idea.
So I would say that compromise would play. I personally, I think that compromise is a large part of. To me, it's ingrained into democracy. So an inherent part of democracy is compromise. I would go further, not just that the vast majority should have. I don't really want to say control, but I'm going to use that term just because I'm not going to sit here and labor in my mind over a better word. The vast majority should have control over
Right.
the society, but at the same time, I do think that they need to be compromising with the majority, as long as the room for compromise is what word am I looking for here? As long as what you're compromising on isn't destructive to the society as a whole, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Right. So you're basically arguing for, so long as there is some degree of freedom, compromise is more favorable towards not compromise. Am I getting that right?
Yes, for the most part, yes.
Right. So again, you'd have to be specific on what areas do you want to compromise. So there are certain areas in my life where I'm not willing to compromise. So for example, imagine if a friend is staying with me, I'm perfectly willing to compromise to not get into a lot of arguments with that friend. That's an area that I'm willing to compromise. But
Mhm.
if you tell me that that friend gets to dictate how I use my computer, what apps do I use, and uh, where do I lay my files, it's a more personal space. So the tyranny of democracy is, it really depends on what are the measures. I would like there to be some areas where there is literally zero compromise on your part, or let's say the government part, the centralized government part, because it's really not your right to make me compromise. And in some contexts, if you make someone to compromise, it will turn into a power play that it is actually not fair to that individual.
And actually I agree with quite a bit of what you said, especially in regards
Roger.
to compromise and through like, a state and everything. I I
Yeah.
am a market socialist. Ultimately, my goal would be communism, a stateless, classless society. I just personally feel that such an idea is at least a century away from being implemented in a proper manner. But ideally, and since we're talking about our ideal world, I might gloss over some nuances and I might make some assumptions. I think that we all can sort of understand that, or at least I hope we all can, that there would be no state in my ideal society. There might be like communes that might loosely govern themselves, and in that sense I think that you would have greater preservation of things like individual liberty and freedom, personal rights and personal property. Because just really quickly, and then I'll let somebody else jump in here, I do make a distinction myself between personal property and private property.
Okay, I would love to hear more on that, but if somebody else wants to jump in, that's okay. But that's a fascinating idea.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of continue on the kind of general kind of veins of like what we were talking about of, you know, like not compromising, just for example. Yeah, I mean, there's a few things that I'm not willing to compromise on. Healthcare is just one of them. I'm not willing to compromise even in the slightest on healthcare. I want a single payer socialized healthcare program implemented, and that's it. I'm not willing to give an inch on that. So if anybody has any pushback, I welcome it.
But when you say you want to compromise, who you don't want to compromise with? That's my question.
I don't want to compromise with anybody who disagrees with the socialized healthcare system.
Why would anybody argue with you then, if they agree on the premise?
Well, yeah, I mean, if like you are in
So you
favor...
only want to talk to people who agree with you. So why talk at all?
I don't.
No, that's not what I said. That's a lovely straw man, though. I never said that I didn't want to talk to people who don't agree with me, or that I only want to talk.
You're not willing to give up any of your positions, so you're never gonna change.
But this was kind of going on the point. No, it's not that I'm not willing to give up my permission.
You just said you're not willing to.
Excuse me. What I said was I am not willing to compromise. What I said was I am not willing to compromise on that specific position. I did not say that I am not willing to change my position. I could be wrong, and I might change, and I might be like the biggest mouthpiece of the private health insurance companies. That could happen. I don't know how likely it is, but it could happen. I am not willing to compromise. That's what I said.
Right.
If I may just a little bit jump into it, I kind of am wondering. There seems to be overall a general presumption in all of you of kind of what is the point, what is the in a way a utopia, what is the good for the man. So I just wanted to ask, why exactly is democracy, or indeed freedom for that matter, why is that good?
Because I like it.
Because it allows people to live their lives in the ways that they see fit, and allows them to contribute productively to society in ways that are better for them. In my mind, if there wasn't freedom, the people who should be physicists wouldn't necessarily be allowed to be physicists. Maybe in some societies where there's no freedom, they might be, but I think that people being able to live freely, and obviously with it, I mean, I'm not speaking extraordinarily broadly here. There needs to be some rule of law. I would imagine that all of us could agree on that. But within the confines of rule of law, I think it's better that people are capable of living their lives and contributing to society in the ways that they deem to be most productive in regards to their skill sets, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, I would agree with that. Only thing is, I would be skeptic if democracy is indeed capable of doing that. And I would like to kind of ask you, what is this determined by, this skill set or place of the people, where every individual should be placed? How is that determined?
For me, are you asking sort of how do we determine what roles people should play in building and sustaining or contributing to society?
How? Well, not exactly. More so, what makes a person fit to that place? What makes a person, become a physicist?
Me personally, I think a lot of it has to do with. I think a lot of it has to do with personal interest. Or some people might not necessarily be personally interested in something, but they recognize that even though I've met people who have degrees in engineering or physics or what have you, that they're not entirely interested by it. It's not that they're bored by it, but they're not fully interested by it. But they recognize that they do have a skill set for it. If you guys can hear a dog barking, I seriously apologize. It's
No,
that they recognize that there is some skill set they have for this, and that they feel that the contributions they would be capable of making would be best served within that particular, I guess you could say, industry, for lack of a better word.
I agree.
So
Although I would just ask, does democracy really do that? Because democracy itself kind of pushes towards certain universalism of the group and of the decision within the group, based upon the vote, which has to be one on the issue from the whole group, especially since you say you support generally widening of democracy, so make it more direct in a way. Do I presume that's right?
I can you repeat that last bit? Just I want to make sure I understood your point correctly.
That you're wanting to kind of make democracy more direct in a way.
I would argue in an economic sense, I would argue that a more direct form of democracy would be ideal. In a political sense, I personally am in favor of what I would dub a socialist republic, where you have republican democracy tied with a socialist economy, where I would argue that a direct form of democracy, while I do think that it could potentially be ideal, I do still think representative democracy, at least currently, would be a better option.
Okay, I understand that. But my general point, contrary to that, is does democracy really do that? It kind of can't pronounce it. Universalizes people in a way based upon the vote. I think it was touched before by Psycho. Sorry, I will say it more simply.
yeah,
It in a way puts people into position of equality in a way, which makes them more universal. So does exactly that system, which is based upon equality, which is based upon universalism, if you agree with that presumption, really bring people to that place?
What I would say is that for me, I don't feel democracy does, or at least should, bring about equality. I would argue that it should bring about equitability. I think equitability
so
is better than equality in most instances.
what does that mean exactly? Like, what would be effect of, let's say, a market, right? Like in economical sense, what would be the difference in your framework between a market that is directed by democracy as opposed to a market that is not directed by democracy? What are the direct influences? Like, can you give me an example?
Well, I would argue worker cooperatives is a really good example, where all of the individuals that are employed by a firm have some say in how the firm is to be directed and operated. I would argue that's better because it takes into consideration the needs of all of the people that are employed by the firm, rather than decisions being made in a more autocratic sense by people who generally don't take the needs of those below them into consideration and really make decisions for the sake of maximizing profits for themselves, and not the longevity and the sustainability of the firm and all of the individuals who partake in it. Because everybody that works at a firm, an economic firm, contributes their labor to the overall revenue that the firm collects. So I think it's only fair that that revenue be equitably distributed amongst all of those individuals, and that all of those individuals
Right,
have
but
some say in how that firm operates.
well, but where you're going wrong in your framework is you're basically categorizing labor as equal in all terms. So we don't have a thing named, like the thing called equal labor. That's not how it
I
works.
don't believe labor is
So
equal.
Well, see, that's the thing, right? If you believe that labor isn't equal, then leadership itself becomes a skill. And if you somehow democratize that decision making, and again, I mean, based on what you said, that depends on what you mean by democratizing the decision making. So, like, if I own a company that produces shoes, is everybody going to decide what type of shoes do we put out? Are they going to decide on the wages? How is that going to work exactly? But the thing is, the system that we have currently, which is leadership and then everything else below that, it actually works the best because you have different skills that are manifested in different ways. So the labor itself, as I said, you don't have one specific type of labor. You have labor as in terms of physical activity, but that shows itself in all the different positions in the company. And if the head of the company employs the right people, all of those branches will function properly without any sort of problem. So I would say, like, if you democratize decision making in a company, that can only lead in disaster because not everybody shares the same skill.
Wait,
Yeah,
it doesn't.
hold on
it doesn't.
one second, because I've been trying to get something in. We have like 3 questions already, kind of like starting
Okay.
to back up. If you want to reply like super quickly,
I
and then
can.
we can start. Okay, then we can start answering some questions that people have been asking.
There is a shitload of data on this. Worker cooperatives are generally more productive because the workers are generally happier. They last longer. They also have a higher chance to actually last longer rather than their general longevity. Especially making it past the 5-year mark. Also, there are successful worker cooperatives. There's a huge one called the Mondragon Corporation in Spain. It operates many branches. All this stuff you're saying there's an issue with, it's like verifiably proven to be false, and generally they operate on better. They operate better. You can see that through data.
Well,
That's all I wanted
I
to
would
say.
have to check. I would have to check your data, but like,
I will post it in
yeah,
the voice
have
text
it.
chat.
So why exactly?
I would love that.
Why exactly
hold on,
aren't they more common?
We have
These
questions
worker
that people
cooperatives.
want to ask, so I'm gonna just throw one out there. I'm gonna go with John's first, just because it's more about what we're talking about right now. But he said, "What is your guys' praxis? I'm sorry, on decommodification? If that changes the subject entirely, I'm sorry."
On decommodification,
Hmm.
I think that it could. I guess I would say I don't really have like a praxis on it. I have thoughts on it. I think that it could be a good thing, but for right now, I don't think that it's necessary. At the given instant, I don't think that it's necessarily the best way forward, and it should be looked at once other aspects of how I would establish the world have been put in place. Then we can look at things like decommodification.
If I may answer to that, my personal praxis would be kind of creating more of a economical and political culture, and which would be more focused on duties, responsibilities, and rights, and privileges coming with that, which would make a thing not necessarily being commodified, but rather a privilege or a duty, from someone to base kind of on a correlation between the person and his environment, which would, yeah, that's kind of my praxis towards that.
I'd say I agree with that. Yeah.
Did everyone answer? And I'll move on to the next question.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I mean, I didn't have too much else to add other than what Leo put down, so yeah, no, I'm fine just to go on to the next one.
Someone else asked, how would you guys propose tackling openly hostile countries in your pursuit?
With extreme prejudice.
War.
How would I tackle openly hostile countries in pursuit of my ideal world? Was that the question?
Yes, like countries that disagree with you.
First with diplomacy, and if that fails, then with varying degrees of violence that seek to minimize varying degrees so that violence can be minimized as best as we can.
Right.
I personally would. Oh, sorry, continue.
Go on, yeah. No,
so
I was about to say I don't have a position on this. It's fine. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So I personally would strive for competition, because on one thing they might have a different environment. They might have a different issues to deal with, and they might have a different ideal approach to things. So if they would be openly hostile to my system within my boundaries, I would personally compete with them. Or if they would openly attack, then well, have a war, be violent, and defend the system itself.
I love that. That little "we'll have a war" in the British accent.
Thank you.
I
Are
think
there any questions?
that's all for right now. You guys can continue hashing that out.
Awesome.
Alright,
I wanted to talk
I've
to.
been talking a lot, so I'm gonna let other people jump in here.
I wanted to ask
Oh
you.
wait,
Oh,
please don't hate me. Please don't hate me. Somebody wants to be unmuted. You can unmute.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't know how bad my internet will be here. But essentially, there's 2 points for the co-op people. First of all, there's just a logical view that workers will prioritize labor over capital, of course, to extend a democratic base, meaning that most successful economic calculation won't always be seen as a labor increase will always be viewed over capital. There's also the view of empiricism. Now, I think a lot of us are Austrians, but even just looking at the empirical view, there's a responses. You guys brought up Mondragon, I believe. Mondragon, I believe in the myth of Mondragon, it was very clearly shown that Mondragon obtained its huge status because Franco was a big fan of the system and allowed it to succeed within the market. He didn't like the individualism of capitalism and the extreme collectivism of communism. And also, I believe it's on page 120 of Myth and Mondragon, they talk about how in the region in which it takes place, there's more worker involvement in the private firms. And the bigger problem with, I mean, the bigger critique that they have too is that much of this success that it was seen was also because workers in this area specifically were big fans of being very ethnically homogenous with their people, mainly because of Catalonia being a problem there in Spain. So, I mean, the empiricism behind it's shoddy, mainly because Mondragon influences it so massively, and Mondragon was allowed to succeed because of Franco being a huge fan of the co-ops. And logically, it doesn't work out either.
Can I ask just a quick clarifying question, really quickly? When you as it relates to the empiricism, are you talking worker cooperatives in general, or just specifically the Mondragon model?
Well, the critique is of the Mondragon model, but that's
Okay.
I was just feeling that because you brought it up, and also because Mondragon, as you said, is just a huge company, so it does influence a lot of the empiricism behind it.
Wait, I'm trying to respond because it was obviously a question towards me because I'm the one who brought up Mondragon. Mondragon was founded in 1956 in a small town by a group of students at a technical college.
Yes.
Franco liberalized the Spanish economy in 58. It looks like it started in 57, ended in 59.
So the liberalization of the Spanish economy did happen in that time period. That doesn't go against what I'm saying. What I'm saying is essentially that Franco.
Yes, it does. Because it didn't rapidly. It didn't grow to a national.
It wasn't an extreme individualism.
But it didn't
also,
grow
there's some other problems with.
It didn't grow to
national prominence.
No, for a while. It didn't grow to national.
No, it didn't go for a while. Continued subsidies still existed, specifically for these models. They talk further about this in the Myth of Mondragon, if anyone wishes to look at it further. And I know, like, I'm quoting a book, and like you don't have a chance to read the book, but to be fair, I mean, you cited a meta-analysis and stuff in here, and we don't have time to read that either. So
I would just kind of counter that. I think that it indeed can work. However, it will only work. And I do not really like that you say that, yes, it is indeed against sort of extreme individualism. Because if you have the collectivist, in a way, or I would say more personalist company, it needs a strong binding aim and coherent, tightly knit culture. So the people will know what they're doing. They need to see what they're doing, which ties to that, to being homogenous. Because indeed, people tend to get with people who are like them. Homogeneous societies generally have higher social trust. So it is not necessarily because he wanted that. It is because it kind of works that way, and it can work within, I would say, conservative environment. It can quite well work, and Morrigan does work. It's not a failed company by any means.
Well, yeah, but what do you mean when we say the phrase works? So I reckon when you brought up this company, you mentioned like the workers are happy. How do we measure happiness exactly? Because in psychology, the measurement of happiness is actually very quite loose with even one individual, let alone a couple. And then you also have the issue of how do you categorize work? So what do you call a successful company? Do you call a successful company that is not able to go bankrupt? Is that the measurement, or are we judging it based on productivity, innovation, stock price? What is the measurement?
First of all, I would say the issue of happiness isn't psychological. It is primarily philosophical because it.
Well, it is psychological when they measure it.
Yeah, it's
It can't really
absolutely
be measured.
psychological.
It can't really
It's
be measured.
absolutely psychological. No, I'm
It
sorry, it's
can't.
absolutely
That is
psychological.
taking a very positive presumption.
Wait, what is
to
psychological?
happiness.
Well, it's not a presumption. I have a degree in psychology. This is not a debate. I know what I'm talking about, and I'm telling you you're wrong.
Actually, it's exactly the debate.
Happiness
That
is
is argument from
objectively
authority.
measurable.
I'm sorry, it's argument from authority. And
Wait,
if
what?
you
Hold on.
take-
What?
It's not no. Argument from authority fallacy is citing somebody who is not an authority. I am literally an authority in the psychological field because I have a degree in it.
So you're making an appeal
honestly,
to authority, though.
But the thing is, he might be making an
it's not
appeal
an
to
appeal. No,
authority, but an
yeah,
appeal
it's
to
appeal to
authority is
authority, but
not
it's a
fallacious.
valid authority.
Wait,
It's a
let's
valid
clear the air a
authority.
little bit.
Esther, please.
Let's cool down. Let's cool down.
No, I'm
All right.
quite sorry.
Okay, so
like-
can I point something out? So when I say it's a psychological matter, what I'm saying is when you cite a research to say that the workers are happier in a cooperative environment as opposed to one that is non-cooperative, the way you do that measurement is by quantifying. So we have happiness, we have the concept of happiness, which is an abstract one. What we do is we try and find ways where we can measure that, and usually the ways where we measure that are very, very unreliable. And you can do like it doesn't have to be an authority. So like right now, think of how you would measure happiness in a way that is actually valid and you can cite in a research.
I asked them.
Chances are you're not going to. Yeah, and see, like that's not really like you have the lying issue, right? Or what do you really consider happiness? Like, is the worker unhappy?
You can like
Sorry,
you can
what?
determine how happy somebody is by asking them. Like I can tell you right now,
No,
I'm not super
that
duper
is
happy with
really
my life.
unreliable.
I'm not super unhappy, but I'm not super duper happy.
But
Pretty neutral.
But that's your criteria. Maybe you're high. How do I know that?
How do I you know I'm not high because I'm pretty coherent.
I'm just saying you're not a really reliable source. Actually,
By
when it
myself,
comes to psychological
but large amounts of people can be when you're gauging the feelings of a large group of people.
Not if I want to fake the research specifically.
Wait,
Like
I
the
just have a quick question.
measurements.
Well, then there would be
Go on.
issues with the methodology. Then there'd be glaring issues with the methodology, and then research.
Yes,
wouldn't
there is.
entirely agree. Also, it's highly unethical, and any researcher would have their fucking license taken away, if not their degree.
That's exactly the issue.
But
Yeah,
are
that's
you
exactly the
saying
issue.
that
Go
you
on, Esther.
can't
You got a
find
question?
people's happiness by asking them if they're happy? Is
Sorry,
that
I
what
didn't catch that.
Yeah,
are you
that's how you
saying
quantify.
that?
It's a
Hold
great
on,
way to
hold on.
quantify happiness.
Let me get the words out. Are you saying that if you ask somebody, "Are you happy?" and they say yes, are you calling themselves an unreliable source?
Well, not specifically, but it's not exactly 100% reliable. Specifically, if you want to
Well,
cite it in research.
Just
Which is
really
why
quick.
you use large amounts of data, meaning a large case sample, which is
Yeah,
what they
Not
do.
if
yes,
if your source is self-identification, though.
I
There
just
are
wanted
other
to
ways to measure happiness.
I just
Like
wanted to point out really quickly that almost all methodologies for measuring something are going to be unreliable to some degree, whether it's infinitesimal or large. What professionals tend to do is weed out methods that show a large amount of unreliability and utilize ones to show a very, very low amount of unreliability. So there's always going to
That
be a
is true.
factor of unreliability, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the data that we're collecting should just be rejected prima facie.
I
What
never
exactly
said it
do you
should be
all mean
rejected.
by happiness? What exactly is happiness?
That's exactly the problem, right?
Well,
That's
I
exactly the problem where
But they're
you
not
measure it.
they're not trying to define happiness, because at least most people have this fundamental idea of what happiness is, and for most people it kind of coincides with the feeling of being satisfied with their life, and what is happening with them.
yes, feelings of
That
content.
is your
So-
definition. That is your definition. If you
Well,
want to do like
that
what's
is
called
the general,
study.
like that's how people actually you
No.
can define happiness. Let's define it, please.
Well, the thing with
So
happiness is it's a state of mind.
The
So
state of being happy.
yeah, and that's the thing is the definition is probably going to be unsatisfactory to most people because it's just the state of being happy. Like happiness is a state. This is why defining emotions can be hard, but the idea that professionals can't provide some definition of happy, or when they interview people, are you happy? Person might ask the I don't want to use the word interviewer because that's the wrong word, but they might ask whoever is asking them the question, or the survey that they're taking might outline what the survey is generally taking as happy, and asking that person if such a definition applies to them. Generally, from what I've seen, it's going to be on a scale. So they're going to ask you on provide a scale from like say 1 to 10 on how content you are with where you are at in life, how much you feel you are satisfied by where you are at and what you are doing, which is going to be a measure of overall happiness. Happy is a very broad term, and I think that might be an issue here.
Yeah.
Actually, it's just a few words: feeling or showing pleasure or contentment, which is how most people feel happiness. Also, they gauge happiness usually by defining it as some form of satisfaction within your job, as in you're happy with your job, you're satisfied with your job, and they gauge that by using worker participation, which is a big part.
Sorry, could you repeat that last bit?
They frequently gauge it using worker participation numbers.
Right. So just to address that, like earlier point, I never said that just because there is an imperfect way of measuring an abstract idea, that measurement should be completely anything and it. You have to specify what do you mean exactly by happiness first in a theoretical framework. So for example, you say by happiness I mean being content in the workplace, no fight, whatever, and then you have a quantifiable measurement, which is I have this survey. If the person who is taking the survey gets 15 out of 20, then you can say they're happy. So it's definitely not settled, and every researcher has a way to go about measuring happiness.
I would agree, but I would think that so sorry to interrupt, but I would think that measures of happiness are going to depend on the particular type of study that is being done. If you're talking about workplace happiness, I would imagine that they are probably going to be using more of a specified definition of happiness and then asking those who are being surveyed whether or not that definition applies to them. So I would still argue that I personally I would argue that there is still a level of accuracy that should be considered there.
Well, sure, yeah. So, and to like, let's move past this measurement issue. I think we've made enough point, and I don't want it to take up more of our time.
Just really quickly, a lot of what you had just said, I did agree with most of that. I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah.
Are we moving on?
Yeah. Great.
If we're moving on, I'd like to ask Man of the West about something, because I've been wanting to ask him ever since he spoke initially. Man of the West, you mentioned earlier in the early beginning when you were wanting to pursue your ideal world, you'd be pursuing it through expanding civilization. Firstly, how would you define civilization in that context? And secondly, do you believe civilization has yet to be expanded to every corner of the globe?
So, civilization so it's basically civilization itself is a complex of peoples who are being civilized. What I mean by being civilized is kind of abstract. Although it can be defined. It's being conscious. It's being conscious about the world itself. It can go with stuff like being humanist in a way, because you're being conscious about humans, being conscious about environment. That is also for me being civilized, or generally being educated. It's about being conscious about the surroundings of yourself. So that is, and civilization is a complex of people or cultures or peoples indeed, who are civilized, who are conscious of the world.
When you mean consciousness, do you mean awareness, like in like the normal
Yes.
context? Okay,
Yes.
so the Romans were not aware of much of the world. Would you consider them civilized?
I would civilized to a certain degree. Yes. Well, they were indeed conscious of their part of the world. They were conscious of how things worked in their part of the world. So I would indeed consider them civilized to some degree.
So are all people civilized to some degree?
In a way, yes. However, it's off to be expanded.
So is civilization education?
It's in a way doesn't it's a bit more abstract than education, but it plays a very large part in being civilized.
Can I ask just a really quick question? Just I want to make sure that I understand, Man of the West. When you use the word civilization and civilized, do you mean that it maybe I'm misunderstanding here, that's why I'm asking the question, but do you mean that in maybe more of a colloquial sense, or do you mean that in a sense of like civilization in that there's some society that exists on Earth, or do you mean it in the sense of people behaving in a manner that is conducive to the success of that society, or do you mean both?
Both.
Okay. You guys can continue your little back and forth because I know.
Although I must probably leave. I have some things that came up and I would unexpectedly have to leave. So I must say sorry for myself. I didn't really expect this to happen. So I must most probably leave.
That's okay.
That's
okay.
Yeah, that's okay.
Thank you for understanding. Goodbye.
Before you leave, I just wanted to say that I did enjoy listening to you, despite the fact that we have disagreements. I think that you're respectful and courteous, and that you do a pretty good job of articulating your point. So hopefully we can have exchanges in the future, because I think that they would be fruitful.
I think your voice is nice.
I agree with that.
Yeah,
You have a very soothing voice, Mike.
Thank you. Yes,
You take care.
Talking to you. Thank you. So goodbye. Have a nice rest of the day.
Bye bye. See you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
What a nice young man.
Indeed.
Very well could have been older than you, Esther.
Oh, yeah, I was about to say. Yeah.
That doesn't mean he's not like young just because he's older than me.
He could be in his 40s.
He could be in his 50s. Who knows?
Still young.
Could be.
He needs to pursue a job as a lecturer, because with a voice like that, let me tell you.
Yeah, that's gonna go places.
Yeah, definitely.
Made me not want to insult him.
So I know we got a little bit off topic. The original question is, how would you pursue your ideal world? Does anybody want to tackle that from like another perspective, or like?
I started, so I'll let somebody else hit that right off the bat.
So actually, Man of the West left on a very interesting question. So just before we get into more details, where does everybody stand on the idea of expanding civilization? Would you say you agree with that or disagree with that?
I think most people are civilized at this point. So
when you say expanding civilization, do you mean like expanding education and what's the word I'm looking for? Oh, God, why can I not think of why am I drawing blanks on the words I'm looking for? Expanding like things like education and stability and wealth, things of that nature?
That was what I was going to ask later on. If you say like, okay, yeah, expanding civilization is cool. So I want a practical framework of, if you think expanding civilization is cool, if that's an ideal purpose, how would you actually define that? And how would you pursue that?
Okay. I'll let somebody else start off.
Any idea? Okay.
Unless nobody else wants to. Steven. Steven.
Yeah, I don't really kind of like know. I guess it would kind of have to like depend on exactly what you mean by expanding civilization.
Yeah, that's what I'm after, right? I want to see what like where everybody's at. Like, what's the definition?
I couldn't really personally. I couldn't answer the question of whether I would expand it unless I knew what was meant by the term expand civilization.
Yeah, I'm
So
kind of in basically
I'm
the
gonna
same boat.
So I'm gonna give you a practical framework of mine, and
Go ahead.
I've been thinking about it lately. I've also discussed it with a friend. I think I wouldn't call it civilization per se, but I would say a moral goal, an ideal society, would be a society that is capable of tolerating its most disagreeable person. And by disagreeable person, I mean someone who is not willing to play by the rules. So basically, I think a good society would be a society where the rebel is allowed to be a rebel and he wouldn't face any consequences for it. Because if you have that, then obviously people who are agreeable wouldn't have that much of a difficulty.
So can I ask a question? And the question I'm gonna ask might be a little bit contrived, and I don't know if it's
Yeah.
taking what you're saying too far. So that's sort of why I'm asking it, so I can kind of gauge where you're at. Should somebody who wants to murder just be allowed to murder?
So see, there is a line there, and like that needs to be discussed. But
Okay.
basically, I mean, it's not a fresh idea. I think a good society is one where it allows the highest individual freedom.
Okay. So would you say that somebody who's being maybe more of a rebel, like somebody who's transgender, which I would argue most people I think would agree kind of is sort of like this. I personally I wouldn't word it as rebellious, but I can see why some people might, that they should be allowed to live their life the way that they want.
It's something like that. I guess like
Okay.
the way to make it more tangible for everybody else would be something like cancel culture and things like that. I would argue that a proper society is one where you would see very, very few of cultural stigmas that prevent people from speaking out. Doesn't matter what their ideas is. Of course, it could expand
I
to
could agree.
action as well.
I would agree with that to an extent. I would argue, and I think you kind of alluded that you would agree with this. Correct me if I'm wrong. That there has to be a limit somewhere, but I think that you're arguing that limit might be pushed a little bit further than say some others, not necessarily myself, but some others might set. I can agree with what you're saying, at least in principle. To dive more into it, we'll just have to keep this discussion going.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't made up that line yet. I couldn't
Yes.
argue for a position. I'm just saying, in a practical framework, I think you could categorize that as a civilization that is worth spreading for everybody. Because I don't see how one person would do in that society.
I would agree with that. I would agree.
Yeah.
I think personally, I think it would increase social cohesion, which I think is a big aspect of having a properly functioning society, which does the most for the most people.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Anybody else want to jump in?
Is anybody else connected?
Yeah.
Yes.
Huh? Where are we at in the discussion? Sorry, I'm having a text chat right now with Rathew.
Oh, okay. Say hi. Well, we were basically discussing how would you define like a society that's worth spreading? Like, what would be a
how would
theoretical
you
framework for
pursue your ideal world?
that? Yeah. How would you market your idea if you think like you've got the best idea? What is that idea?
Well, earlier I said I wanted to pursue my ideal world by collectivizing the means of production, distribution, and exchange, and expanding democracy.
Poggers.
Hey, can you close my door? Or stop screaming? One of the two? Cool beans. Close my fucking door. Stop screaming.
Oh, I'm sorry. That was a little bit of humor. A little bit of humor.
A little bit, yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, it's fine.
Hey,
Yeah, okay.
I'm gonna just really quickly. I'm gonna step away for about 30 or 40 seconds. I do have to use the bathroom. I will be right back.
No,
Yeah, no problem.
What's your question, Rita?
I've got this.
were you the one with the,
Go on,
the
yeah.
background noise? I was gonna say ask her what her ideal society is.
Her. That's my little brother.
sorry, you're the
Uh,
brother. Right, my bad.
I'm gonna laugh my ass off and blow later.
How would you punish rebellious teenagers in your ideal society?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe with extreme violence and executions. That'd be a big one.
Yeah.
Okay, let's just steer away from that. Does
I'm sure
anyone
you can
want to
get
take
plenty of parents agreeing with you.
Does
Go on,
anyone want to take this question from like a religious take, a religious point of view,
Please don't.
instead of political?
I mean, like,
Well,
I guess, I mean, like, some people are like gonna kind of like expect either me or Leo to kind of answer this in a certain way, but at least for me, I mean, look, I'm an atheist, and anybody who kind of knows me knows that I am an atheist and stuff like that. But I'm not gonna force anybody to become
I am
an
back.
atheist. I'm not going to outlaw religion. I'm not going to ban religion. I'm not going to ban the Bible. I'm not going to ban the Quran, like any holy book, because I think that they're important for education. I mean, if like nothing else, just for education, I think that they're very, very important. So I'm not in the interest of kind of banning religion or like making it illegal or anything else like that. Look,
Agreed.
do I hope that, you know, it does eventually just kind of die off? I mean, yeah, sure, but I'm not going to force it. I'm not going to. Yeah.
Are we
You
on
know
a
what I mean?
are we on a religious discussion or
Well,
talking
we
about
just
religion?
kind of.
I don't.
It was just one question that just kind of popped up. Sorry, you that you were saying.
What
I
was the
very
question?
rarely, Esther, I very rarely look at politics through a religious lens. And the reason for that is because for any Christian, that's pretty much impossible in a Western country because the type of, what do you call it? The type of political system that would be espoused by Christ himself would be a form of theocratic monarchistic distributionism. It would be a very strange, impossible in the Western world ideology that nobody would be okay with fully committing themselves to. It's why I dislike anybody claiming Jesus himself as being the reason for their political positions. Unless, of course, they are a theocratic monarchistic distributionist.
Can I jump in here really quick?
Should they?
Yeah, sure.
And I don't know exactly what the question was asked, so if my statement's a little off base, just interrupt me.
Esther can tell you the question.
It
Okay.
was just taking the main
Really quickly,
question,
was
how
it a
would you
question
pers-
from the audience?
Wow.
No. It was a question. It was just
Oh,
taking
okay.
the original question from the perspective of of religion. So before it was like very political. How would you pursue your ideal world? But like religiously, how would you pursue your ideal world?
I would prefer one personally. I would prefer one that is secular, but secular doesn't mean that religion doesn't exist. It simply means that within the frameworks or the institutions, hierarchies, whichever word you want to use, that are there, that are sort of governing and that people are involved with on a day-to-day basis, you know, politically, economically, because I advocate for worker co-ops. So within the economic firms, within governmental institutions and bureaucracies, I would argue that religion shouldn't play a noted role. But that doesn't mean that people shouldn't be allowed to have a religion and practice a religion and go to church and everything like that. I think that people should be allowed to do that because that helps to preserve a bit of people's culture. And I do think that there are aspects of culture, whether specific or generalized, that should be preserved and that people should be allowed to engage in. I think that it also helps with social cohesion when people feel that, you know, their traditions and their cultures are going to be allowed to be practiced. I think that is beneficial to a society. I would say that there might be a line that I draw. I would at least assume that most people, whether in this particular panel or outside, would agree that there's probably a line somewhere where you can draw. There are certain traditions like sacrificing babies to make it rain for crops should not be practiced. But for the most part, secular society, but that doesn't mean get rid of or target religion in a negative way. That's my take.
So, see, like when we're talking about like religious liberties and things like that, I'm always more interested in what people don't allow as opposed to what they allow, because it's very easy to say what you allow, and it's way more difficult to make clear what you don't allow. And also, I think it's
agree.
more interesting if you mention practical punishments. So, like you said, you were talking about it should be allowed, but not to a specific point. So, do you have an example of that specific point in mind, and how would you punish that?
So like stoning gay people would be something that I would not allow, or what you might see in a lot of Muslim countries where they circumcise females. That's not allowed, or where the society forces women to dress in a particular way when they go out in public, or restricts the activities that they can engage in because they're women. So things of that nature it would be what I'm talking
So,
about
like,
for the most part.
Circumcision is a very good example, right? Because that usually happens when you have a child and the child is under the what you call it, supervision of the parents, let's say, for the lack of a better word. So, would you prosecute that parents if they like apply circumcision on the child? How would you punish those? Would you punish the supervision, or would you ban it? Because it's bound to happen.
Yeah, my response is going to really sound like special pleading, but there is a justification for it. For males, no. For females, yes. And the justification is that female circumcision is straightforwardly, it's drastically different and does significantly more damage to the sexual performance and the stimulation that is felt by a female than it does for a male. Which for males, there is a lot of data out there that shows that circumcision can be beneficial. There's no data that shows that female circumcision is beneficial. In fact, most of the data indicates that it's detrimental. So somebody who's circumcising females, yes, I think that there should be punishment. Males, no.
So what would be that punishment? That's what I'm more interested in. Like, how would you?
I don't know if I could give an answer right off the top of my head, mainly because I would, in my mind, that punishment I think should be left up to whatever bureaucratic institutions are running that society. I wouldn't want it to be like harsh, like you're not gonna, be lined up against a wall and shot in the back of the head. But there, what I would argue is I would just make it illegal, and that doctors who perform it lose their license to practice. That's what immediately comes to my mind in terms of something that would help sort of prevent female circumcision from taking place in a country.
Right. Okay. Thank you. That's a good,
yes. No problem.
Answer. Anybody else? Okay. We'll see. When it comes to like my own ideal version of when it comes to like being religious, I would argue that the internet and all the recent technologies that we have, the right for the individual to have meaning is actually a very, very important one. And I would actually specify it that way. I wouldn't call it, some people would say religious liberty. I would call it the right to invite and practice whatever is meaningful to you. So in my ideal society, I would put that up as basically a free market. So people who believe in Christianity would be able to campaign for Christianity. People who would be for something else, they would have the means of media. They can build platforms, YouTube channels, even more free platforms where certain ideas aren't discriminated against. And you would allow basically any idea that is more appealing to win out at the end and gain the majority.
Excuse me.
That is what I would say.
Okay, I agree with what you said in at least in principle, and I know I say that a lot, but there's always technicalities that people can dive into. But in principle, yes, I agree with what you said. Somebody wants to start a YouTube channel that's based around Christianity, it should be allowed to do that. They want to start their own church, they should be allowed to do that. I don't think that they should be restricted in doing that. I don't think that would be. I think that would be a restriction on their individual liberty and freedom.
Right. Yeah.
Because I am a libertarian socialist, so individual liberty and freedom is something that I do think is important and needs to be preserved.
Absolutely.
So really quickly, I just came up with a question, and it's a bit off topic. It's more about like taking care of the population. So how do you guys feel about like socialized medicine or anything
like
that?
universal healthcare?
This world that you're pursuing.
Yeah, 100% for it. And again, I'm speaking particularly from the United States, so people might have disagreements on what I'm about to say, but in the U.S. Constitution, namely in the preamble, it specifically outlines that the role of our government here in the U.S. is to promote the general welfare and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. I think that the government providing or ensuring that everybody can get the healthcare that they need without going into debt, without having to pull a second mortgage on their house, without having to sell their car, without having to drop out of college, or just not buying the insulin that they need because they can't afford it and then dying 5 days later in their bedroom. That's wrong. The government the role of the government is to step in and ensure that these people are being taken care of as outlined by the US Constitution. So I am all for
Yep.
universal health care here in the United States.
Fucking preach.
I would say I'd completely disagree with that, specifically because I don't know where you guys come from, but where I come from, which I shall not name, we have a very, very strong universalized healthcare, and it is actually terrible. And I actually had my family on my father's side was actually involved in building 2 generations in building state hospitals, basically, because this city was actually very underdeveloped before. But then, as the technologies kicked in, they were involved in building 2 of the hospitals. So my uncle, my dad's uncle, was basically they're employed by the government. He eventually died out because of cancer, because a lot of the equipments that they were installing, there wasn't proper supervision to like observe it. And apart from that, like I've lost family members because of that lack of supervision. And you also, right now, as we have it, we have plenty of state hospitals or state subsidized hospitals, which are doing a very, very bad job. And then in order to compete with that, because there is a monopoly on the hospitals, you have very, very few private hospitals who get the best doctors, but the price is very, very high. So I would say if you remove government monopolization on healthcare, and you let the insurance companies compete for the price of insurance and also the doctors that are employed, you will get a way, way better healthcare. And I'm saying this in the position of like
If
my
you can
dad
afford it.
actually knows.
So I did want to respond to that.
I
Matt.
want to say my family is
If I can just
spent
jump in, guys. I haven't talked in like half an hour. The
Yes,
kind of main
please do.
problem with that is, yes, obviously if you can afford it, that's like the one kind of biggest one. But the major problem with the US healthcare system right now is that 45 to 60,000 people die every single year because of lack of basic healthcare, because they can't afford to go to the doctor, because they're afraid that if they do go to the doctor, that they're going to tell them that it's something serious and that they have to go to the hospital, and they're looking at the bills for the doctor and the bills for the hospital. And one of the things that is going on in the US right now is that you cannot declare bankruptcy because of medical bills. So even if you do declare bankruptcy, those bills carry over. So you still have to pay them off. So moving to a socialized healthcare system where it's paid for through taxation, that is free at the point of service, meaning that you go into the doctors and you don't have to take out your wallet. Like you can leave your fucking wallet at home. You don't have to bring it with you. And the same for a hospital or a specialist or a anything. Now, of course, healthcare is going to be rationized. Healthcare is rationed right now. It's rationed based on how much money you have. So, for instance, if you have the gold, ultimate, platinum, fucking any like what label you want to put on it, if you have that standard of healthcare, yeah, probably you'll be seen like the next day, even if you have a fucking toothache. It doesn't matter what you have, you're still going to get seen the next day because it's rationed based on how much money you have. Under a socialized healthcare system, it is rationed based on need. So if you have, if you need to have a gallbladder surgery, you're going to have that gallbladder surgery because it's pretty much, it could be life affecting. But if if it's something more kind of cosmetic, then you're going to have to wait a while, but that's okay because the person who needs the healthcare is going to get it when they need it. And that's not what's happening in the United States right now.
So see, you're talking from a perspective of a system that doesn't have socialized healthcare. I'm telling you that
yes, which the United States does have, and Ireland does have socialized healthcare, and I can guarantee you, if they ever move to a privatized healthcare system, I would hate it.
Well,
I did.
I see your point. Go on. Yeah, you
I
wanna
did
speak.
want to provide a response because it seemed to me that you were arguing that a free market healthcare system would ultimately be better than a government-run healthcare because of the free market. But the thing is that here in the United States, that's exactly what we have, and I can cite like objective data that shows that the healthcare we have here is worse than almost every other industrialized nation on the planet. I mean, I can cite
Well, the
from
issue.
I can cite research published in Annals, which is oh god, who owns them or who runs that site? I cannot remember right off the top of my head. What is it? The ACE, the Annals of Internal Medicine, from the Lancet, which is also a publication, from journals.plos.org, from Springer, from Merritt Hawkins, and from the Economic Policy Institute. That like all of the data collected in the United States has shown that a private or a universal healthcare system would provide better outcomes to more people than the current system. That all the systems in Canada and in Europe and all these industrialized nations is objectively and demonstrably better in the United States. The United States is one of the only free market healthcare systems on the planet. At least it is the only one amongst industrialized nations, and it has the worst outcomes, the highest percentage of GDP that is spent on healthcare. And the researchers say, spending more on healthcare is good if it provides better outcomes, but in the United States, it doesn't. Free market healthcare just doesn't work because it's a profit-based system, and the companies are focused more on providing profit to their shareholders than they are with actually providing reasonable care to as many people as possible, and that is an issue. Healthcare is a right, not a privilege, and for that reason, it should not be managed by a free market system.
Healthcare is not a right, so that's issue number one. Issue number two is
you don't think that
wrong.
humans have a right to be healthy?
Would you let me finish? So I'm going to repeat it again. Healthcare is not a right. That's number one. Number two is your data is wrong, and number three is your objective.
How do you know my data is wrong? Did you read all the
Wait,
studies?
wait.
Can you
substantiate any of your points?
Hold on.
You didn't let me finish my third point, though. Again, right?
Yeah, but your second point, you said that
no.
my data was. How do you know that? I didn't cite any data.
We can
I
talk
didn't
about
cite
my
the studies,
second
but-
point when I say my third point. Is that fair?
Sure.
Well, actually, kind of, no, it's not really, because if you have an issue with the first or second point, then there's no point in getting to the third if we're just going to have to work backwards. So I'd kind of rather kind of deal with the issues as they come up, and then you can go on and list out the three objections that you have.
Practically, I forgot my third point, so you guys can continue.
Guys, don't dogpile on psychologists,
Yeah,
please.
like it's like Leo was talking for
It's
a bit,
fine.
so if he wanted to get through his points,
No, you literally just
give him
forgot
like
one
a
of your
minute
points.
to talk instead of.
All his friends left him.
Yeah.
It's fine. Story of my life. No, see, healthcare is not a right. Why would you say healthcare is a right?
Because
Well,
humans
make
have
that
the right
case.
to be healthy. It establishes that humans. will
Why
live
do you have
longer,
the right
more
to be
prosperous
healthy?
life. Because you're a human. No human has to be born.
Those are
Because
now
because
we're
because,
interrupting
because
each other, so
wait,
let's
the
chill that out.
Constitution of the country I love and am born in and am a citizen of has enshrined life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness as rights. All of these things require healthcare.
No.
That's a lawyer's answer, and I don't live in that country, so prove
Then I
to
don't
me
care.
how
Not a
healthcare is
lawyer's answer, it's just true.
Yeah.
Then I don't
If you
care.
have the right to,
No,
if
it's
you
not,
have the
though.
right to life, you don't even need to go over the other way. If you have the right to life, then I mean, continuing or living the most. You're talking over me. Talking.
Guys, you're over talking
If
each other.
you have
Go
the
ahead
right
and
to
finish.
life, you don't even need to go over the other two, although they like, can be lumped in and it's not a problem. But if you have the right to life, then you have the right to the most the most prosperous and the most healthy life that you could possibly live. Healthcare is essential for living a healthy life.
I
That's
just don't
not
understand.
debatable. You can have issues. You can have issues with a single-payer healthcare system, but that is not debatable. Healthcare is essential to living a healthy life. That's not debatable.
What rights does the individual have then? Wait. What rights does the individual have?
Let
do you
him
think?
respond.
The rights that you have are rights that are granted to you by the agreement that you live with the government.
Yes, and in the United States, life is amongst those. Is healthcare not a part of that?
But you're not convincing me that healthcare is a generalized right.
So do you think
is
that
not
humans?
a universal right?
Can I ask you a question? Are you pro-life at all?
I would say so, yes. Although There are.
So you
you might-
believe
So you're
every
pro-life, but
you-
you're arguing against single-payer healthcare
Wait,
system?
let him speak.
Seriously?
Let him speak. Let him speak.
Yes.
Let him speak.
Yes.
so you are
I am.
pro-life.
Let him answer
Yes.
how. This is a nuanced issue.
So you being pro-life, you believe that everybody has the right to life, has the right to live their life and be alive.
I wouldn't necessarily frame it like that. I think if you kill an unborn baby, that's a person that is dead by other individuals.
So, but what if
Okay.
an
It has
actual
nothing.
person dies because they couldn't get the care that they needed because it was way too much money and they didn't have the money? Is that not equally is wrong?
But it's not the same thing, though.
But I didn't ask if it was the same thing. I asked if it was
So-
equally as wrong. Is it?
No, it's not equally as.
Why-
I mean,
why
what
not?
do you mean
What's
by
the
equally
diff-
as wrong?
Well, so killing a baby in the womb is wrong to you, correct?
See, again, there's more details to my position. What I'm telling you, don't think beyond this. It is murder when you kill an unborn baby. That's where it begins in that word sense.
Okay, why would
It
you
has
say that it's,
nothing to do with
why would
race,
you say that's murder? Because it's a life and you're ending it
because it is.
unjustifiably?
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay,
Not
so
unjustifiably.
is somebody dying because they don't have health care justifiable? And if so, in what way?
See,
Because if
the
not, I would argue
justifi-
that the system is murdering them by not providing them with what they need to live their life in a healthy and productive manner. Not
you
only that,
guys,
but more people dying means less people that can contribute to the productivity and the advancement of our society. And I think that that reduces things like social cohesion, it reduces productivity, and it reduces progress, which in turn destroys civilization.
you are examining this from a moral position.
Exactly,
Right.
yes.
That
Right
there is
now,
an
yes.
argument there to be made. But in terms of practice, health right is a service that you're choosing to receive. Now, the guys that are arguing for state healthcare or universal healthcare or whatever you want to call it, they're choosing to receive that service
When I'm on the
from
ground,
the
when I'm
government.
on the ground
When
having
I-
a seizure and someone
I
calls
would
He's
911,
still finishing his
appreciate it.
point.
I would appreciate it if I could finish. You guys are either choosing to receive that service from either the government or from the free market. That's all there is to it. Morality is attached, yes, but that doesn't enter when we're talking about efficiency and quality
So
in a
what
practical.
but all of
Yeah.
the data shows that a universal healthcare system is more efficient and more qualitative than a free
Yeah.
market system.
when
Like,
I'm on the
I
ground
this
would have
isn't
to
even
see that.
and
Yeah.
someone calls the wee woo wagon, so I get charged $10,000 for that little ride. Amazing.
Now
So-
that brings
choice.
us.
Actually, $800. Sorry.
So you said you
That would
wanted
bring us to the second. Sorry, go on.
you said you wanted to see data on that, if I remember correctly? Because I
Well, I
have
have seen data on
I
that.
have
I
I have
wanna see your.
I have a technical paper here from the Library of Medicine of the National Institutes of Health, the ncbi.nlm.nih.gov. This was published in
Right.
2012 by Goran Ridic, Suzanne Gleason, and Ognjen Ridic. And they state in this paper, it's entitled, and I am looking at this on a different laptop than the one that I am streaming from because I have it saved. So I'm going to give you the title of it, and you can look it up if you'd like to see it. Comparisons of healthcare systems in the United States, Germany, and Canada. And they state in this quote, it would appear that systems that ration their care by government provision or government insurance incur lower per capita costs. On the other hand, in the largely private system in the United States, waiting times tend to be shorter than in ration systems, a conclusion that follows simply from the theory as well as from observation. Americans have been more dissatisfied with their healthcare system than Canadians or Germans have been with theirs, end quote. So while they do argue that in a free market system, wait times aren't quite as high, but people still tend to be significantly more satisfied, and healthcare still tends to cover less people at a higher cost. And I have probably close to 24 studies on universal healthcare systems, and not one of them shows that a free market system is in any way more efficient, efficacious, or qualitative than a government-run system.
Can I jump in?
That's because you don't have a free market healthcare in the United
Yes,
States.
we do.
You just
Yes, we do.
Yes, you do.
You don't.
We do.
Yes, you
100%.
You
do.
do not. You have.
Okay, hold on, really
huge
quickly. In
government-
what way? In what way do we not?
Remove the government and all its subsidies and special favors in terms of lawmaking for healthcare systems, and then you'll have a free market.
Yeah, but the thing is, the reason that our healthcare system still actually operates and still provides care to a decent amount of people is because of those government regulations. Obamacare, while I
That's
don't agree with
exactly
it
how they
because I
keep you
don't
hooked.
Obamacare, while I
Wait.
don't agree with it, and I think it's terrible because a universal healthcare system would just be better, still has insured over 20 million more people than previously and reduced premiums by 20%. Though with the Trump regime, because it wasn't an administration, it was a regime, the Trump regime and the
Ugh.
Republican Party that backed him gut Obamacare,
Mhm.
and so premiums have started to go up. So, albeit I would prefer the government not be involved with healthcare, they kind of have to be to get it to run efficiently.
Someone
You're
wanted to
basically
hop in.
describing how. Sorry, go on.
Sorry, someone did want
Go
to
ahead.
say something. I think.
Oh,
Yeah.
Leo.
Lily.
You had
Oh,
mentioned
it's for
you've read.
Leo. Okay, so I'm gonna let the other guy finish his point. I'm sorry, I can't see your username because of
No
it's
worries.
on streamer mode. But you can finish your point and then you can ask your question to Leo. That was for you
Uh-huh.
with the hat and the man with
Oh,
the hat.
sorry.
Psych.
Yeah.
Yeah, call me Sai. Yeah. So
Sai.
what you're describing is how your government is basically training you to appreciate poison half the way, and then well, by poison I mean the government healthcare system, and then you're terrified of the fact if the poison goes away, everything will be even worse. You basically have a half measure, is my point. They're conditioning you to a very terrible healthcare system, which is government healthcare, and then they're gonna slowly increase that because you think that is actually better than the free market version. Whereas if you get the actual free market version, it's gonna be
So
That's a great
exponentially
claim.
better.
That is a great
Oh,
claim that you
wait,
can't
hold on,
substantiate with
unit.
data.
Hold on, unit. He did have a question.
I don't know why your volume is so high. Go on.
Unit's mic is just tends to be loud, but you can
That
ask
is
your question, gray background person.
Ritas.
Yeah,
Sorry, I can't see anybody's name. You can
Oh,
ask your
that's
question.
fine. Yeah.
Leo. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So you had mentioned that you've read a bunch of studies on this. I was wondering if you had any studies that has like a country who went from a private health insurance system to a universal healthcare system.
like studies on how the transition takes place.
Now, how much more effective the universal healthcare was compared to the private.
I mean,
Well,
I
do have
anecdotal evidence on that, but I totally accept if you don't take that because
I do have a meta
Ireland
analysis.
moved from
I do have a meta analysis published in journals.plos.org. It is entitled Projected Costs of a Single Payer Healthcare Financing in the United States, a Systematic Review of Economic Analysis. And in it, they state the following, quote, our search yielded economic analyses at the cost of 22 single-payer plans over the past 30 years. Exclusions were due to inadequate technical data or assuming a substantial ongoing role for private insurers. We found that 19 or 86% of the analyses predicted net savings. A median net result was savings of 3.46% of total costs in the first year of program operation, and 20 or 91% predicted savings over several years. Anticipated growth rates would result in long-term net savings for all plans.
What was the title?
The title was Projected Costs of Single-Payer Healthcare Financing in the United States, a Systematic Review of Economic Analyses. I really wish I could link these, but I'm working from two different laptops, so I dearly apologize.
Yeah, you're the one on that Mac, right?
Yep.
Oof.
Hey, Psych. If they're done, earlier you made a claim that you couldn't substantiate with any form of data or evidence. You said that like they were inoculating us with whoever they is, the government, I'm guessing, with government-run healthcare propaganda in order to make us think that it's better than it really is. Apart from the fact that you can't substantiate that with any form of data or anything, I can tell you as a fact of somebody who's lived in Texas all my life and has recently moved to California, and I'm just about to get actual healthcare for the first time in a very long time. I can tell you with absolute certainty that at least even if the healthcare here, even if somehow it isn't as good, at least I get it.
Good for you.
Very good for me, actually. You see, my personal anecdote isn't worth that much, except when compared to your personal nothing.
Well,
I'm just joining.
I mean,
It's a shit
If
show.
I may ask.
you would be wrong there.
Oh, you
would
got
be
something
wrong
for
there
me?
because,
1 second.
You got something for me? You got some of that
you'd
evidence?
be wrong there. Well, I do have evidence because you failed to mention that almost for the majority part, at least in the academic people that I've met, they're mostly for
I failed to
universal
mention the
healthcare.
people you've met.
Wait,
Let him
hold on,
finish let him finish his point. Go
That
on.
is simply to say that I haven't read any specific paper on people's bias when it comes to healthcare.
But
So
so
you would
I did
agree.
I did want to
One.
ask just a really
Go
quick
on.
question,
Okay.
just to make sure I heard you properly.
Mhm.
You said that from
Right
the
now.
academics you've spoken, most of them seem to support a universal healthcare or a single payer system.
Yes, and that would play a bias factor in the plan for the healthcare itself.
In what way?
Well, usually when you do research, you do meta-analysis to see if there's anything wrong with the measurement. But
Well,
what happens then?
meta-analyses can be a part of research, but research generally isn't specifically meta-analysis. What research is, especially
Yeah,
within
that's
like
what I mean.
something like universal healthcare versus free market, is examining both systems and correcting for particular variables to see which variables likely
But
result
you're not
in better qualitative outcomes and more efficient provisions of those healthcare. And it seems to me, from all of the data I have read, as well as the professionals that I have seen, on top of the anecdotal evidence, which can be taken at whatever value somebody wants to take it at, that universal systems, single payer systems, seem to be objectively better than free market systems.
Yeah, but you're not accounting for the bias of people who've made that research. So that's point number one.
Why are you assuming
You
that
don't
there's a
know.
bias in the research?
Because you always should assume there is a bias in any research.
Why? Because the whole point of scientific research
That's
is to rule out biases. That's literally how the scientific works.
therefore that's the first thing you should look out for. So that's point number one. Point number two is in terms of anecdotal evidence that was mentioned by I don't know your username, sorry, for your move to Texas.
No, I moved to
I'm glad that
California.
you're getting.
I moved to
Oh, you
California.
moved to California.
Lived in Texas my whole
Great
life, though.
choice. Right, yeah. So I'm glad that you're getting good healthcare, but that absolutely does nothing for the efficiency of healthcare on a mass scale. So that point is irrelevant.
Sure
The mere
thing.
fact that you're
point.
getting help. Yeah, glad to make it. So that's that. Anything else, Esther? You want to say something?
Alright. There was someone talking. I think he left though. But
He did,
Oh,
okay.
unfortunately.
Are we still talking about healthcare, or do we
Are
wanna?
we?
I
have to
guess
be.
we can move on.
I was gonna say it might sound somewhat pompous, but I do think that I've made my point. All the
Yeah.
data seems to indicate that single payer healthcare systems are more efficacious, are better at providing healthcare at a more efficient rate to more people at lower costs than a free market system, mainly because the
I would
profit factor has been eliminated.
That's true, but as I pointed out, you also literally do not have a free healthcare system in the world that you can compare that measurement against.
Yes, we do. The United States. The United
You
States
don't.
is
The
a free
United States.
market care
No.
system.
No.
Wait, so let me
No,
ask you a
sir.
question. Is healthcare provided by privatized insurance companies, by the government? In the United States.
Say that again.
In the United
Say that
States.
again.
In the United States,
Uh-huh.
is healthcare provided by privatized insurance companies operating within a larger market framework, or is it provided directly by the government?
That's irrelevant to my point because so long
It's
as you have
literally
government
not,
intervention.
because in the former would be free market, and that's
Mhm.
exactly what we have. The latter would not. The fact that the industry is regulated doesn't make it free market. You can have free markets that are
Wh-
still regulated. Because under
So
your
whenever
definition, literally no industry in the United States is a free market, and that's just not true.
Well, I mean,
That's exactly my point.
countries with non-universal insurance systems are the closest thing you're going to get to a free market healthcare system in the modern world.
Exactly.
are areas like Bangladesh, Burundi, the DR Republic of Congo, Egypt, Ethiopia, India, Indonesia, Jordan, Kenya, Nigeria, not Niger, Paraguay, the UAE, Tanzania, Uganda, Yemen,
You got
and
the whole map. You got the
Yemen,
whole
and
map.
one of these, the last one of them is not like the others. The United States of fucking America.
That's still an
These are
irrelevant
all
point. You don't have
these
to
are all
remove it.
third world countries, with the best one being debatably Paraguay to live in, or the UAE. But in the UAE, there is such a horrible wealth inequality. One of the best one is probably Paraguay, dude. And then on that list, you also have the country with the most wealth on the planet, the preeminent world hyperpower, the best fucking country with the biggest dicked population, the United States. And they don't have free healthcare. We're on the same level.
USA, but we don't have health.
I've heard people describe Yemen as the worst country on earth.
I just want to ask just one question. To Psych, you've said that the US doesn't have a free market healthcare system. What healthcare system does it have?
It is a mixture. Well, it's continuously being breached more and more by different governmental interventions. That is also a part. Go. Very nice of you to shout. It's also continuously being tempered with by both Congress and Senate, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure about the last one. So unless you remove all of those, you're not gonna have a market healthcare system.
Okay, so what you said is that the system, which you failed to kind of quantify or to specify exactly what it is, you said that it's being tampered with by like Congress and by the Senate, but what is the system that is currently in place that is currently being tampered with by Congress and by the Senate?
Well, it could be something like it's kind of like what we describe in America's capitalism, which is crony capitalism. So it would be something like that in terms of.
Hold on. What's the difference between capitalism and crony capitalism? Like the capitalism that exists today in the United States is significantly less predatory than the capitalism that existed like in the early 1900s. Capitalism is inherently crony. It's inherently predatory. That's the problem with capitalism.
No,
This distinction between capitalism and crony capitalism is just is like it's almost like purely aesthetic. It's not like a real. It's a rather superficial. Anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. What is crony capitalism? What is that?
Well, again,
it's just capitalism.
So that would be
capitalism.
Please don't scream. Go ahead.
Yeah, please do not. So it's basically exactly what I described as a system of healthcare, which is you have both government increasingly monopolizing everything, and also the private sector basically using that intervention and abusing the system. You take that definition and you apply it to a capitalism, which is it's a form of capitalism where the private sector actually uses government intervention to increase their profit. So the ideal system is to remove government intervention. You would have absolute free market, and then you let competition figure out the actual result.
Okay.
That is what we call crony capitalism. It's government interference and basically the free.
Okay.
So I did have a question.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
So, what would you say to the fact that people were significantly worse off in a capitalist society, especially here in the United States, until the government stepped in and started regulating those businesses and ensuring that they were providing a decent means of living, a decent standard of living to working class people?
I would say that's a myth.
Is it a myth though? So do you know how many seniors were living in poverty prior to the passage of Social Security?
What year was this?
Social Security was passed, I believe, in 1938 or 39.
So that's after the formation. That's after formation of Federal Reserve, right?
I believe so. Let me double check just so that we get accurate information here.
So I'm going to give you a definitive answer on this. Basically,
yes, it was. The Federal Reserve was established in 1913.
Exactly. Federal Reserve is the root of all evil in your country. And I'm going to give you a definitive answer on this. basically everything that you had in terms of economy got worse after the Federal Reserve. So there's your
Except that
answer.
it didn't. In fact, the U.S. economy has grown to the largest on the planet and has maintained that since at least the 40s.
Yeah, look out for the next 20 years then.
Yeah,
Look out
well,
for the
we,
next 4
we,
years.
we can predict what's going to happen in the future, but it doesn't change what's happened in the past. By the way, Social Security was established in 1905, and prior to that, I believe it was something like 90 to 95% of seniors were living in poverty. They were dying at rates that were over what they should have been if they were
Well, what is your
where the middle
definition of
class
what is
was.
your definition? What's your definition of poverty then? Because this is
I
actually very
I would go with what is traditionally defined in terms of economics and poverty, where the line set by government institutions. Obviously, what it was back then is different than it is today due to naturally the inflation of the U.S. dollar.
right.
But
So
and
you
that's what they're
trust
going off of.
so you trust the government to set a definition of absolute poverty, and then you
Well,
expect the government to
of
claim they're helping that
of
poverty, and then
absolute
and
poverty, no, but a reasonable definition for what
all sorts of poverty.
financially, what reasonably a definition for what can be reasonably considered poverty. I don't think that our government has done a terrible job of doing. I don't view the government as some evil overseer of society that's
That
imposing
is
its will on everybody, especially here in the United
that is
States.
exactly
I
how they
don't.
do it.
I would rather there not be a centralized state, but right now we kind of have to
Mhm.
work with that. So I would just rather improve it than just sit there and bitch
Why
and
do you have
complain
to
about
work
what
with
they
that?
do.
Do you want to abolish all governmental authorities?
As much as possible, yes.
Cool,
See,
your will is possible.
What did you
Yeah.
say? What was your counter argument to his position?
That's impossible. You can't get rid of governmental authorities. You can get rid of what various
May I
anarchists
ask?
He
find
said
in the
most.
state, but you can't
Yeah,
get rid of governmental authorities.
yeah, you can get rid of like
What's your
centralized bureaucratic institutions, but you're not going to be able to get rid of governance in and of itself. Not even in
sure,
an anarchist
yeah?
society.
sure,
Anarchy
but
doesn't mean there's no
My
governance. It just means that it isn't centralized into some sort of bureaucracy or institution.
sure, but most.
my answer was as much as possible, which is pretty definitive in its own definition.
Well, yeah, I honestly I would agree with you. We should
Your
minimize the
Yeah.
centralization of bureaucratic institutions over
Your-
society. I think that would be cool. But right now, I don't think that that's feasible in society right now specifically. But I do think that we should work to that. But right now, what I would say is that since we kind of need bureaucratic institutions at the given instant, we should try to structure them in a way that benefits the vast majority of people.
Let's pause
Well, the
real
issue
quick.
isn't.
Really,
Go on,
really,
yeah.
really
Go on, yeah.
sorry because I know there are some people who are like muting and unmuting, like they want to say something. So to just open the
Yeah.
floor for anybody who wants to say something and just quickly interrupt before it's just two people talking back and forth again.
You can scream if you want to. Okay.
I'm sorry.
I saw Hello Sphere.
Right.
Did you want to ask something? Sorry to put you on the spot. It's just that I'm.
No, it's fine. I don't care. Hello, everybody. I'm Hellosphere. I'm one of the mods here. It's nice to meet
Hi.
everybody.
Hi,
How's
nice
it
to
Hi,
meet
going?
you.
Hi.
Yeah,
It's good. I know it's a joke. Hellosphere. I know it happens all the time.
Hello,
Every-
Sphere.
I've been called greetings circle. I've been called by circular object. It's bad. But anyway, so yeah, so is there anybody here who is not an anarchist?
Me.
I am not an
Oh, I
anarchist
shouldn't have
at
said
the
it.
Yeah,
given
I'm not.
instant. The closest that I get to anarchism would be that I am an anarcho-syndicalist, but that is only one half of my sort of socio-political ideology, the other half being market socialism or libertarian socialism.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm not an anarchist at all. I mean, yeah. Look, me and Leo, like on politics, are like I'm sure there's some like minor differences, but I mean, like basically, I'm gonna just throw out a number, probably like 95 to 98% agreement. So
Yes,
like, yeah,
definitely.
I would probably just kind of parrot what Leo said. I'm not in favor of like, yeah, of like the like
In
more
in
traditional version of anarchism, but yeah.
in other words, Stephen is saying that, like me, he is based and bread-pilled.
I'm a
Yes,
boring
absolutely.
I'm a boring
He
old
says
Marcus.
something about Kropotkin. I'm gonna. Anyway. But okay.
Marcus socialist personally.
If I guess this is the only way, like, for me to be able to filter out like any kind of person I'd want to ask questions about. But if I build a house on an undiscovered and deserted island, and no one's ever been there before. And I build a house, and I grow my own food, and I live there in isolation. Do any of you have a problem with that, and or want to engage in violence against me?
No.
It depends.
No.
Okay. It depends on what.
It depends on a lot.
I don't, but but I'm pretty sure plenty of other people do.
Some people would just because you have something they don't, but
Yeah, I mean, just for kind of purely like petty reasons, maybe. But
yeah.
no, I don't.
But what I would say is, you know what? Fuck them kids, man. Do you?
Yeah,
Okay.
like if you're
Yeah.
living on
Yeah, I
an
agree with that.
undiscovered island and you've built a house for yourself and you're able to sustain yourself,
Yeah.
yeah,
If I,
no, I don't have a problem
if-
with that. I mean, you might get a little bit lonely, but other than that, yeah, no, I don't have any
If I,
issues with it at all.
if somebody,
We would appreciate an invitation, you know.
Yeah,
if-
you know,
if somebody-
nice little housewarming party maybe, but that's about it.
if somebody becomes stranded there with me a few days later, and I
Yeah.
talk to them, and I'm like, "Yo, I figured out that you're a pretty good carpenter. I have all this corn that I've grown. I will give you some corn for your carpentry skills to build me an outhouse." Does anyone have a problem with that?
No, that's that. It seems like you're kind of
Yeah.
starting to go down the road of communism.
I have a question. Does that man with the that you gave the corn to for the carpentry house, is his labor being respected? Is he capable of growing his own corn? Are you respecting him? If he is incapable,
I'm not. I mean, maybe he doesn't know how to grow corn, and maybe I do, but I'm not physically stopping him from growing
So
corn.
now you have an effective monopoly on the things that other people require to live. I think that's morally wrong.
How do I have a monopoly?
Why is that morally wrong, though?
Hang on. Let me ask him though. How do I have a monopoly on the things required for him
How
to
do you
live?
Food. He has no other way to access any agriculture, and as you said, it's an deserted island. It's a deserted island. I don't think it's very large. In all likelihood, it doesn't likely have a lot of natural resources, apart from maybe fertile soil for corn, which he has no idea how to grow. You do. You've already taken all the good farmland in all likelihood. You've been there a while. He hasn't. You have an effective monopoly on that corn.
What happens if he needs a kidney operation and I'm the only one around with a good kidney? Does he have a right to my kidney?
No.
Because that damages you.
Yeah.
That is
Bodily
what? I'm sorry,
autonomy.
but
Yeah,
doesn't.
bodily autonomy trumps everything.
How do I
I
come
mean,
to own my body?
the fact that it's yours.
Okay,
Yeah.
is your body a scarce resource?
Yes, but how do you establish that?
How do I
Okay,
establish
is your
that
body
it's
a
your
How
body?
many
Tackle each
bodies
other.
do you have?
Let's
Okay.
not tackle each other.
Guys, one by one.
All right, how many bodies do you have?
Just one.
Okay, that's a scarce resource. There's only one of it in the world. It's the most scarce thing you can ever have.
Spirit.
I mean,
Other than like all the, I mean, other than like the dinosaurs, that's the most scarce thing ever.
I would kind of go with more of like a kind of a straightforward thing of like all surgeries. Look, there's a degree, and it's it's not certain for like all of them, but with all surgeries, there is a risk element, and something could go wrong, and you might like end up dying on the operating table because of that surgery. So I don't think that anybody should have the right to force you to get under the knife or to do any sort of a surgery, even if that means that somebody else dies. There's nothing to, because I mean, like, other than that, you're like, it's like not even to kind of straw man you, it's almost to kind of steel man. If somebody, and I'm not even necessarily saying you, if somebody was to argue that, okay, well, if this person needs a kidney and you're the only match that we found and they only have days left, you need to don't. What you're essentially arguing for is like forced organ. What's the word I'm thinking of? Donating, like. And that's just not a system that I think anybody, as soon as it's kind of like argued out, maybe like wants to live in. So
well, I'm not trying to strawman anybody here. The reason why I say that is because so I'm probably, as far as property goes, I'm probably most accurately described as something called a no proviso Lockean, meaning that I subscribe to like the first half of his like property beliefs, meaning that if you mix your labor with something, it's yours. And so I think that like this is like the language here is a little idiosyncratic, but like I think I mixed my will with my body when I was born into it, and I think that I might thereby mix my will with any number of acres of land, and so I wonder if I've done that, then what entitles somebody who's never done any of that to ownership over those things, even if they are starving?
Oh, so you're talking in terms of the body. So what do you mean exactly?
So, like, if you own something, like I'm talking to everyone over my phone, for example. So, like, I own this phone, which means that I can determine what happens to it. I can exclude other people from using it, and that's the same thing with my body. I can determine what I do with my body and who can do what with it, and that's generally just me. I can determine what happens to land that I own, and specifically in my case, land that I either mixed my labor with, like built something on it, or traded voluntarily received goods for. Like in this case, the corn I could trade for some land that somebody else has, mixed their labor with, or did the same thing with somebody else. So what I'm wondering is, if I've done all this to own a piece of land, and this land happens to be the only source of sustenance on the island, even if it's the only source, why is it that I am like physically obligated to, like, I'm assuming to the point of like violence, like physical enforcement, to give up this land for this person if they're starving?
I don't
That's a good
think
question.
that you have a right to I don't think that they have a right to your land, but I would argue they do have a right to some food.
Isn't that
Why
part of the
though?
land?
Why would you argue?
Why? Because they're a fucking being.
Yes, but what does that have to do anything?
But see, again, you're
So
arguing
wait,
from a
hold
moral
on.
standpoint.
Are you
Wait,
saying
whoa, 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 whoa.
are you saying that are you gonna let humans die,
No,
despite the fact that you're
If
probably producing more food than what you yourself could consume?
No,
Okay, so why does somebody have a right to food that's made?
I'm sorry. What was the
Exactly.
wait? And the person that just spoke. What did you say? I couldn't hear you.
Because people have a right to life.
No, but why? Why do
But
they
I
have a
don't
right to
have
life?
but they don't have a right to take my property.
Yeah, exactly.
I agree with that, but
have
I think there's a limit to it.
I
What
have a quick question. I'm
If you can have
sorry.
physical ownership over your own
Are
body,
we?
then
'Cause
guess what? That's still property.
hold on. I have a question just to like clear this up, and also I have another follow-up question that like changes the subject if anybody wants to move on. But really quickly, everybody's saying you have the right to this, you have the right to that, but this is assuming that you are on a deserted island with no constitution or any sort of government at all.
Government's not the grantor of rights.
Huh?
Yeah, I purposely choose that
Government's not the
scenario.
grantor of rights.
The reason why I choose this scenario is not to like make it into some imaginary it isolates away those kinds of issues. So thank you for pointing that out as
Okay.
That's a good
Okay,
point. Yeah,
just
that's very
to I didn't catch who said it, but somebody said that the government doesn't grant you your rights. Then who does?
well,
They're
no
endowed
one.
by
That's the
nature
point.
themselves.
I'm
By
sorry?
nature itself.
Oh,
Like it's inherent.
Is it inherent?
And
Says
that
who? How do we
But
know
it
that it's
is.
inherent? How?
Okay.
so
So listen, can you speak?
Of course.
Yeah,
All right.
I'm doing it right
Okay,
now.
so let's say a government holds a gun to your head and says you can't speak. Can you still speak?
Yes.
Yes.
You have the right to freedom of speech. Right
Well,
there.
This is derived.
is
This is
that a
derived, is it
right?
not?
Is that a right, or is that just an ability? Because those are
it's a
two
right.
completely different things.
Like,
Yeah,
for example, you
it's
have
a freedom or it's an ability, but it's not a right. In
Yeah,
that
no,
context that you've laid
okay,
out, it's
so
not a
how do you
right.
stop it? You have
do
to
it.
you have to once again violate someone else's rights in order to stop that, don't you?
No, I have to
Yeah,
violate
in
somebody
that
else's
scenario that you've laid out, whose
ability.
other
But
rights
to
are you
stop
violating?
We're
speech, you
talking
must
over each other
violate
a lot.
rights.
To stop
so
speech,
let him
you
finish his point.
must violate rights. Well, I would
Yes.
argue
No. Like,
if
well,
if
listen,
you
if you use
grant speech
coercion,
being a right, then yes. But
Leo,
if
let him
speech isn't a right, it's an ability.
Hang on, Leo.
it
Leo,
is.
let him clarify. Go ahead.
All right, here's the thing. Speech is once again a right because guess what? You have the right to liberty. Because if we assert that you have the right to life, liberty, and property, then that is one of your liberties. And the only way to stop that is by coercive force.
Yeah, but that's after we've asserted that it is a right. We establish what's a right and what's not.
What do you mean by a right to life?
A right to life. Like, for example, do you exist? Do you have the right to live?
No, but what do you?
Well, not the right to live, but the right to life. Not as in like.
What do you mean by a
nobody can.
right? And if you have a definition for right, then what is a right to life?
A right is something that is endowed inherently, not by like nature, but it's just endowed in general. Something that
And
you
what is
have that
that?
cannot be taken away.
Well, what
unless
is it?
you inherently violate a right.
Okay.
Isn't that
So
specifically an inalienable right?
what is that? What is
Yes.
that? What is that?
Inalienable, yeah.
What kinds of duties does
So
that
that's
like
the
entail upon other people?
All right. You have the right
see.
to life,
This is
liberty, and
why.
property.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
So, and this will be for Kamikaze. In 1832, in specifically the United States, did black people have the right to own property?
Again, the government cannot necessarily grant rights. They're using coercion to do that.
But that doesn't answer my question.
But again, they inherently violated that, didn't
It
they?
does.
That doesn't answer my question.
But it does, doesn't
No,
it?
it doesn't.
Because all you
No,
have
it
to do is
doesn't.
move the goalpost.
No, it doesn't.
Yes,
I'm
it does.
not.
Yes,
No,
it does.
you're
Yes,
you're
it does.
dodging. You're
Wait,
dodging the
wait,
question.
blah,
You're
blah, blah,
dodging
blah,
the
blah.
question.
Look at
Let's
what
not
look
play
what
that
you're doing.
game.
You're moving the
Did
fucking
Hold
black
on.
people?
goalpost. Like
Did
some
black
sort of
people?
Hold
No,
on.
I'm not. You think I'm
Yeah,
moving the
you're moving the
goalpost, but what I
goalpost.
did is I offered a scenario
I
that you
did was
can't
I
answer, and so you're just refusing.
Guys,
to
no, you're moving the damn
In
goalpost. Like some
1832,
sort
did
of
black
dick
people
shit.
have the right to own
Everyone
property?
stop
Yes or no?
talking for a moment.
It's a closed-ended
Please,
question.
Yes, but they
everyone,
were not granted
stop
it by the. They were not allowed by
talking
the state.
for a
Guy-
moment. Thank you very much. Okay. So one person says you're moving the goalpost, the other person isn't. So Leo, you can finish your point really quickly.
Well, it wasn't a point; it was a question. In
Well, I mean,
1832, in the
yeah.
United States, did black people have the right to own property?
Yes, they had the inherent right
Okay,
to,
so
but the
how come they
government did not
couldn't?
allow them to. The
Well,
government
see, but
literally
the
said,
government
"I'm
gives you
going
your
to shoot
rights.
you if you try that." They will
Yeah,
shoot
because
you
they
if you
didn't
try
because
that.
they didn't have the right.
No, because the government
Yes.
can't grant
Well-
rights. They didn't
Well,
take away a
it
right. They
like,
suppressed it.
the government
through
does grant
coercion.
rights, though.
Can
But
I
it can't.
can I intervene
Yes,
here?
they
Can I
do.
intervene here?
Yeah, go
Alright,
ahead, please.
Kamikaze Leon. So see, this is the issue that we had this exact same issue with the whole healthcare argument, which is the phrase right itself is confusing you guys. So the
It's
reason
not
that the
confusing
framework
me.
that I'm
No, it's not confusing me, but thank you
well,
for the insult, though.
It's not confusing anybody.
I didn't mean it as
Confusing
an
me, I'll
insult.
tell you
I mean
that.
I mean it. I meant it's
I
derailing
don't
the
know what other
conversation.
possible way you could have meant that, but carry on anyway.
Well, I guess that's a personal issue. But what I mean is
Not a
the
personal
reason
issue, it's
that
just basic understanding of the English language, but okay.
English is my third language, so sorry for that.
Okay.
So see, this is why the framework is sort of convoluted. When we're talking about the right to protect your privacy, that is to an extension your control over the things that in the course of your life you're contributing to and you're allowed to have a certain level of control over. So but the body is a very, very good example of that, because assuming you're born with a body and you don't do anything, you just basically live off the jungle and you eat stuff from trees and stuff like that, you still have control over your body, right? And what we do with simplifying the right argument is that we extend that to things where you put your labor into and therefore you have a control over. So if you look at it from this specific point of view, literally everything outside of that, if you call it a right, just confuses things. You are born, you have the right to life. So I would redefine that as control over your body, and I would find it confusing if somebody disagrees with that. And then when you're born, up to a certain degree, you're allowed to gain labor, gain land, gain whatever you have throughout your life. So that is your basic right. And this is where, when we have powerful governments, a conflict of right enters the framework, which is, I think, Leo, that's where you're like derailing the whole conversation. It can be a little bit
I
confusing.
wasn't derailing
So,
anything.
I
no,
just
I
have
mean,
one
I
point
mean,
to make. I just want to say that
the
now. I will, of
contradiction
course,
that
let you finish. I just want to say that I just have something to say afterwards. Carry on.
go on. Yeah, I would love to hear that. So what? Sorry, I forgot your username. Kamikaze is basically pointing out is that when it comes to your question about when Black people weren't allowed to own something, if you remove the government from that equation, Black people are still capable to a relative degree to have control over whatever they own and whatever they work for.
So, quick question:
Does
if
that
there
make
was
any?
no if there was no government
Leo, I
in the
said
same
that I
time
wanted to
period,
say something.
yeah,
Come
but
on, man.
this is a really good point. In the same time period, if there was no government, do you think that Black people still would have been allowed to own property? Because I would argue no.
Yes.
And the funny thing is
Why would you?
rights when we're talking like from a philosophical standpoint, rights are normative, meaning that they're not inherent. It's like
Well,
like
that's
like
why
like
that's why I don't like.
in ethics, like normative ethics and everything, right? Yeah, rights are normative, so that they're not considered to be inherent by the vast majority of professionals that would be talking on the subject.
Go ahead, Stephen.
That is exactly why it convolutes all
hold on.
discussions.
Go ahead,
Because you
Stephen.
just hop on more rights and rights.
Wow.
Right? Go on.
Amazing.
You want to say something?
So you had said that we all have the right to life, but that you would change that to say that you have the right to control your own body or something on those lines. Am I in the ballpark?
Yeah, I think that's a way more practical definition to not get confused while you're arguing with something.
Okay.
Or
Then
for something.
I'm so happy to hear that you have changed your position and that you are now pro-choice.
Well, yeah, from a
Okay.
perspective, yeah, I would say I'm pro-choice.
Awesome.
We were on that for a while. Can I
Yeah.
suggest like the question for everybody to talk about?
Sure.
Go ahead, yeah.
So, like way earlier, probably like 30 or 40 minutes ago, we were talking a lot about like decent, like basic rights and like basic standards of living and like a decent
Right.
standard of living. But what would you guys consider to be a decent standard of living
It depends on the society, in my opinion.
in your
Depends on
ideal
what it
society?
You're talking about like a minimum level of good standard of living, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Like in your ideal
Like a
society,
tolerance.
what is a decent standard of living? I don't know if I'm saying that right. It doesn't sound right, but like decent life, like living standards and like, you know, what things that people would be able to afford to buy in like a basic standard of living.
In my worldview, it would be free and what's the word I'm looking for? Unmitigated. I don't think that's what I'm. God damn it! Why am I having this problem tonight? I don't know. Free access to things like clean water, clean air, shelter, healthcare, and the ability to pursue one's goals and destinies as they see fit within the framework of some rule of law that itself does not infringe on what we have decided are rights for the people living in that society.
Do you frequently experience performance issues?
What?
That was a creepy line.
That was a really creepy question. I don't even know what it means.
Depends on what
It
action I'm
basically- it-
performing.
Yeah, it basically means is that like does he like sometimes struggle to stand to attention? Shall we just kind of put it that way?
No.
Okay.
Okay, so when you say like housing, let's say somebody
Shelter.
wants to have I'm sorry, shelter. Let's say somebody wants to have 10 kids.
Okay.
Like what would be a basic, like would people have the freedom to like have as many kids as they want and like still be able to take care of themselves in your basic standard of living?
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
I don't think that's. Well, yeah.
I was gonna say I would
Go
say
on, yeah.
yes. I would say yes, but that's it. Yes,
Carry
but
on.
the but
Awesome.
the but depends on certain particulars that we're considering for a given society. So I mean, if we're talking in a society where there's like way more people on the planet than what the planet could reasonably and our cohesive societies could reasonably constrain, then I would say yes, but there should be a limit. So I mean, the yes, but the but part depends on what particulars we're granting for that society, what conditionals we're granting.
Okay.
So see, yeah, I mean it's a great question because from a perspective, it helps fish out any idea that's too utopian. So I like that about it.
I gotta step away to the bathroom. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Yeah, that's okay. Okay. It's kind of difficult to define, but I would say something like you would have as little wasted potential as possible. That's a minimum bar that I would set. So if and also like removing social pressure to quote unquote succeed would be very good. You know, like if you're living, like if you're working in a normal job, like a average pay, you would have relatively good price. Everything would be well priced, not overpriced, and they would be able to live their life as they wish to live. That's, I would say, that's a good minimum bar.
This life sounds really expensive.
Yeah,
Like,
that's
it
true.
sounds like people are like, yeah, you can do whatever you want and make like
Well, see,
$50,000 a year and still be able to live
but
however
in
you
that,
want.
but in that framework, right? You're not forced to be successful. So if somebody isn't putting in a lot of work, they wouldn't be extremely punished for it. I think that's very important.
Hmm. I mean, how are we defining success? Because there's like personal successes, like I've been
question.
able to accomplish this, and then there's success among like your friends, like compared to them, how successful are you? And I
Yeah,
think it's gonna come up anyways, especially in like a social environment, because we are social beings. You know, we're all secretly
yeah.
judging each other, whether we want to admit it or not. So, I mean, I don't know, like, how would you go about um, like
I'll
lowering social pressure?
I'll give you a practical one, although it might be a little bit like too perfect, too idealistic, but as little homeless people as possible. That would be
That's good.